Hello, my name is Olivier Langlois, and on behalf of the Federal Youth Network, I would like to welcome you to our virtual learning series. I would like to begin by acknowledging that I'm here on the traditional unceded territory of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, and I encourage all of you to acknowledge the land you are on as well. As we move to today's session, please share your comments in the chat space and questions by using the Q&A button in the language of your choice. You can vote for the questions you like by clicking on the thumbs up button. Please note that this session will also take place in French on another link at 2:30 p.m. Veuillez noter que cette session prendra place en français à partir d'un autre lien à 2h30. This is the second event of the Get to Know Your Team series, during which we will explore ways to engage individuals and create stronger, healthier teams using a variety of tools. Today, we will take a dive into psychometrics. What are they and what can we learn from them? Without further ado, I will pass off the mic to Charlene, who will be our amazing moderator for today. Charlene, the floor is yours.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Olivier. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining. My name is Charlene, and it is an honor to be here with you all today. I am joined by two amazing speakers who are going to talk to us about psychometrics and how we use them, how we use psychometric tools to better know ourselves and others. Personally, I'm very excited about this topic because I don't quite know exactly what they are. I work at National Defense, and I don't think I have crossed any of these tools yet, although I am familiar with them. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce you to Robert Armstrong and Jody LeBlanc. Based in Halifax, Robert Armstrong is a manager of human resources at Public Service and Procurement in the Atlantic region. Prior to PSPC, he was working at the Canada School of Public Service, where he worked on employee and organizational development across all departments. Robert has years of experience working in virtual and dispersed teams prior to the current pandemic and continues to adapt as the virtual workplace evolves. Thank you so much for joining us. And allow me to introduce Jody LeBlanc. Jody LeBlanc is a public servant, collaborator, entrepreneur, writer, speaker, mentor, and coach. She has followed her heart throughout her career, and as a result, has had some very unique and exciting experiences. She is currently a free agent with Canada's Free Agents and chooses career opportunities where her skills and passions align. She is also a former national chair of the Federal Youth Network and is very proud to see the strength and growth of the network in the past 10 years. Thank you so much for joining us. I am so looking forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Charlene. So great to be here.
Yay. Before we get into the discussion, I wanted to go over an introductory poll just to see where everyone is at. So you're going to see some poll questions on the screen, and this is not a test. There is no pass fail, and it's not mandatory, but we would love to see where everyone is at before we get into this discussion. So the first question is, which psychometric tool are you familiar with? And then the second question is, do you feel you are an introvert, extrovert, ambivert, or maybe you don't know what any of these words mean? Third, for me, it is important that my team is efficient and always on time, or harmonious and fun. So please choose a way. Let's see where we're at. Okay. All right. So 36% are familiar with MBTI, Myers-Briggs Type Indicator. We've got quite a few introverts, and ambivert is a close second. I am an ambivert myself. Ambivert stand up. And we would prefer a harmonious and fun team. I love that. All right, let's get into it. So, when we talk about psychometrics, what exactly are we referring to? What does that mean exactly, especially from a federal public servant construct? Who would like to go first?
Go ahead, Jody, you can start.
Sure, absolutely. Thanks, Robert. Thanks, Charlene. So psychometrics to me, they're tools or self-assessments that can really help us identify our different abilities, our aptitudes to do various things, competencies, could be our values, character traits, anything like that, even our preferences, our likes and dislikes. So there's so many out there. Three types that I've been reading about: intelligence, like emotional intelligence, but the ones that we're seeing in the poll there are really about personality and our preferences, the Myers-Briggs, based on Carl Jung's findings.
So I have a question for that, if that's okay. Let's say I'm just applying to the government and I'm brand new, when would I run into a tool like that? Or is this after I go through a competition and I'm in my role? Is that when these tools are applied, or is that something that they gauge beforehand?
So I can handle that for a second, Charlene, and then Jody can fill in. But I would be actually quite surprised if I saw a psychometric assessment done during a staffing process. In HR, of course, we're looking for all of those things that you see on the statement of merit criteria. We're looking for your experience, for some personal suitability criteria, and things like that. But generally speaking, we don't use those across the federal government. Now, I know for particular fields, the Foreign Service, for example, for some security and law and order kind of roles, there might be some psychometrics done. I see them a lot more often when it comes to working in teams and building teams and looking at differences in communication styles in the workplace. So not to say that they wouldn't be seen in selection processes, but generally speaking, that's more of a private sector approach to things. Not saying that that's a bad thing necessarily, but really, if that were part of our hiring criteria, I would be shocked because it's not what we do.
Well, thank you for that. Jody, did you have anything you wanted to add?
I completely agree with Robert. I have never seen them done in any staffing through public service. However, our colleagues that are listening in today may have run into some of these psychometric tools in university or even high school. There's so many out there, and they can even help us. I remember doing Myers-Briggs in university, and it helped me hone down my top 10 career options based on my preferences and personalities. They may have seen it before public service, but as Robert said, we're using it a lot for professional development and teams.
And that's the thing, because one of the things that I think is one of the strengths of using these tools is that you're able to determine and put some words around some of your strengths and maybe some of your gaps. But it's never to say that you can't do job X or job Y or task Z. It's more about knowing that you may be have more ease with this task or this job than another. It's not to say you can't. So that's why I would be a little bit concerned if I saw it being used in selection processes to say you're not fit for this job. It's more like saying you are super fit for this job, a little less so maybe for this one, but if you know your gaps, then certainly you know how to fill those gaps.
Perfect. That's really good to know. What if you are someone who doesn't quite know what it is that they need yet? Then how would these tools be used? I think that's more so, I guess that would be more so like from a leadership perspective, right? Where if I were a manager, for example, and I had to assess the needs of my team, then I would be using these psychometric tools to see who needs what in case they can't particularly indicate or clarify what it is that they need. Does that make sense?
It does. And Jody mentioned that it's often used in educational settings, right? So to help people determine best career paths or avenues to explore for career choices. And it can be done, and it should perhaps be done more often as we're in mid-career stream or beginning our career, right, where we can use some of these tools to say, these are perhaps gaps that I have when it comes to my own leadership style, or perhaps these are gaps in my followership style, which we never talk about. And so we can look at ways to address those gaps by looking at training or looking at coaching, or even I think one of the better ways to approach it is to look at people on your team who are strong in those things there that you may have gaps in, and shadow them or take them out for coffee, or just have conversations around it and discover how it is that they harness that power that you're not harnessing right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And the psychometrics we mentioned in the chat, like Myers-Briggs, Insights, Discovery, and DISC, we're perfect the way we are based on our assessment. So it's how we adapt and connect with others that have different styles than us as well. But when you're doing perhaps like an emotional intelligence assessment, it gives you your strengths and your weaknesses and your areas of improvement, so that you can work more harmoniously with your team and really improve some of those gaps that you may have. So,
I love what Jody's saying there, because it's often, not often, but sometimes we come across people in our work world who think that they've done all that growth and they're developed and they're great the way they are, and I love those people, but I'm one to believe, and I think perhaps we can lead them also to understand that we can all grow, right? And these things point out areas for improvement, as you say, or room for growth, and we can always get a little bit better at some of those things.
100%. I totally agree. Um, Learning about these differences are important, but once you know them and know the different styles, how can you use that in your interpersonal communication? What would you both suggest?
I find a lot of the personality and preference assessments really help us break down our assumptions. So assuming certain things about people just because of the way their personality or their preferences are, we want to break those down, be curious, ask why, talk to individuals. If you receive an email per se that you might want to kind of snap back with a reply, you might say, I'm going to pick up the phone and what do they mean by that? What get more of the details there, and be able to adapt your approach. If someone really wants the details, don't go in and pin them down for a decision on the spot. Give them all the details they need and the time to think about it. Or someone on the opposite who really just needs the information, the key pieces, go to them with just those key pieces to help them. So once we know about the different styles, we can be a bit of a chameleon and adapt our approach so that we can get the best out of our teams and avoid conflict as well.
I love what Jody says there, because it really is about adapting, isn't it? It's about knowing that, I have my preferences and you have your preferences, Charlene. And if you and I are going to be working on a project together with Jody, we should know her preferences as well. And that just enables us to kind of meet people halfway. And it's not about imposing my preferences on the two of you. It's not about you doing the same to me. It's about us understanding that in order for me to feel efficient and to feel valued sometimes, or to feel that I'm seen and heard, you may have to adapt the way that you communicate with me. And the same goes for me when I'm trying to work with you and communicate things to you about what I need in order to move this project forward.
I love that. Adaptability is key. That's going to be one of my huge takeaways from today. I have a question I would love to hear from both of you for this answer. Can you share an example of a success story from your workplace at any point in your careers?
Oh, sure. Thank you. So many examples. I think one in particular that comes to mind is I was working in HR a few years back, several years now, and I went to a colleague to get advice and guidance on an investigation I was working through. And when I approached the individual, they said to me, I'm going to have to get back to you tomorrow on that. So I went back to my desk and I thought, this is really urgent. I need this information this week. This individual's been in that role for several years. I'm really shocked that they couldn't give me an answer right at the moment. So that was fine. I just tried to let it go, work on my other pieces. And the next day they came to me and they had so many great things that they had taken and analyzed, and all these things that they would have never been able to respond on the spot. So I thought at that moment, I said, wow, you know, they needed to go back and get the details, and they came back with 10 times better of a response than if they had just responded on the spot. So to be aware that not everyone is just going to give you the answer on the spot. Based on their preferences, yes, she would have been able to answer. She was so experienced in her role, but because she took that time to reflect, she was able to give you the best service possible. So I found that to be something where be careful when we make assumptions, and wait it out, because everyone has a different style in how they respond. So that's kind of one example, but one other quick little one. Sorry, Robert, because I don't know if my first one was really strong enough, but I worked on a team before where my director was a visionary and had so many ideas, tons and tons of ideas, but we needed individuals on our team to also say, okay, well, we need some details. We need to really flesh those ideas out. And then we have another individual that's want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to contribute, or they're the peacekeeper per se, if there's a bit of conflict coming up. And then we need those individuals that, okay, enough of the ideas and the details and getting all the thoughts, let's take it to action. So that's all for preferences in one. And when we don't always have those 4 preferences on a team, we have to stretch a little bit, and we have to fill those gaps and maybe chameleon into a different energy flow in order to get the most out of our teams. So those are just 2 small examples. Robert, I'll turn it over to you.
I have so many examples. I've been working with psychometrics for years, and most of the ones that were on the list, in fact, all of them, and you know, with thousands of learners, I suppose, by now. And it's a lovely thing that happens when you're delivering a session and seeing a revelation, right? The light bulb goes on over somebody's head and they're like, that's why I don't like working with her. And that sounds negative, but it's actually a really positive revelation, right? To understand that it's not that she's a bad worker. It's not that we're not meant to work together. It's nothing judgmental. It's about just understanding that, you know what, we work differently, but we have to work together. So now that we know how it is that we work, we can work on adapting and meeting halfway. But maybe one of the best stories I have, I'll tell it quick. We were working on brainstorming, and I love working with those visionary people, as Jody put it. And so our director had come to town. I'm in Halifax, and a couple of my colleagues had come down from Moncton, and we had taken over a giant room with the whiteboards, and we were going to spend 2 days envisioning things and thinking ahead to the future and coming up with great ideas. The 2 of them are built for that, you know, lots of blue sky thinking, lots of idea generating, super excited about it, full on energy. I mean, extroverting all over me. I was exhausted, and really, no lie, exhausted. But because we knew each other and we knew one another's preferences, they knew how to read my body language, because sometimes I wouldn't vocalize that I was exhausted because I was trying to play along and keep up and contribute. And one of them would look at me, you know, at the right moment of the day, because we'd worked together for quite a while at this point, and she would look at me and she'd say, "Whoa, we're going to go out for coffee now, because you need a break from us." And I just kind of nod and go, "Oh God, yes, please leave me be." They would go off, they would bring me coffee back, super kind. And at that moment, I had time to re-energize, regenerate my productivity. But the other sneaky thing we did, we had a colleague who we wouldn't invite to these brainstorming sessions because it just was not her style. But she was the queen of details, so good at looking at people's great ideas and picking them apart and saying, this isn't going to work. That's a terrible idea. We tried that in 1997. What are you thinking? Now you can imagine during the brainstorming, having her there, not the greatest thing, because it deflated people's balloons. But I would invite her in as the other 2 were off for coffee because they were never back on time. And she and I would sit quietly with each other, using our introverted skills, looking at the whiteboards. I would go up with my marker and I'd be going with her, "So what do you think of this?" And she'd just nod and say, "That's kind of neat. Talk to them about that later." She'd look at other things and go, "Absolutely not. And the best part, here's why," right? Not just to pick those things apart and say that they were trash, but really to say, here's my wisdom, here's my experience. Maybe you can take it back to them. So I really enjoyed those sessions because we did end up with great ideas. that we could then operationalize by going to the people on the team who were good at that stuff and who didn't really get excited about this kind of open session with no limits.
Oh my gosh, these are such good examples. I feel like, Jody, your first example really resonated with me because I think I would be that person who probably just needs to take a beat and write all of my ideas down and then send it in a very detailed email. But it's interesting because maybe on the other side of that, that might be like seen as taking too long to get in a deadline or not responsive. So it's really, I can see, like, it's happening for me right now. I'm getting a revelation of like why these tools are important and why they work. So that's really, 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 really good. Thank you so much for those examples. I hope they've resonated with our audience the way some of them are resonating with me. I wanted to know if you both could give some examples of departments that are using these tools. I work at National Defense and I've not run into them yet. I'm still a little early in the career, but I have not run into them. So I was wondering if you could tell me where these tools are being used, or if you have any ideas of where they might be used or where they would best be used.
Would you like to go first, Robert?
Yeah, now I don't know all the departments and I don't know the story across the country, but I guess the real thing that happens with these is, let's remember, they cost money, right? And in fact, some of them cost a lot of money. If you're going to do an insights discovery full profile, and it comes with these awesome bricks, which we can talk about later, and other things that are not gimmicky, actually they're real tools. It might cost around $300 per person. So budgets are what budgets are, and maybe it's not something that all 10,000 people in your department are going to go through. That being said, some directors, and in fact, everybody should know this, most EXs across the public service have gone through more than one of these psychometric assessments, and some of them have their preferences. So if you have a director who has a budget, who feels that it can be a tool put to use across the entire team that reports to her, it really is a nice idea to kind of promote that idea with her and see if she can scrape some budget around this year and make it happen. What I can say, just from my own knowledge, is that some of these pockets are, for example, the pay center, right? Everybody's familiar with the pay center in Phoenix, and they're the ones who make sure that you get paid right and on time. They've gone through it, and it helps them as a team work together more cohesively. And that was something that they undertook when they were created, not that many years ago. There are other pieces in my region. For example, the Atlantic Canada Opportunities Agency is a big believer in certain of these psychometric assessments, and they run all of their people through them. There are other pieces in my own department. I'm at Public Services and Procurement Canada. In my region, for example, I run the procurement people through this. I run the HR people through this. I run our procurement assistance people through this. Our corporate services and strategic management people all go through this. It's nice when you have a core team that have done it. It's nice that they remember that there's always turnover. So in my particular instance, every 6 months, I collect the new people who've been hired, all of those names, and we have a little budget so that they can then be brought into the fold, because it is a strange kind of culture thing to go into a group that has the shortcut talk, right? They talk about, for example, in this model of insights discovery, we talk about our color energies. So we talk about being a cool blue or having a preference for another color energy. And it is kind of a foreign language. So if people just hold on tight and wait a few months, they'll run through the workshop, and then they can go back to their team and use that same shortcut vocabulary to understand that really we're talking about our communication styles and our learning preferences and even our managing preferences. And it helps us just have a better way of talking about those things and working better as a team. Sorry, Jody, that was a long explanation. Do you know anybody else who's using it currently?
Yes, actually, well, the Canada School I know was using it as part of their service excellence course, but I don't know if they still are. Currently, where I'm on assignment with Measurement Canada, it's a small agency with about 350 people. We have done the whole organization with insights discovery and emotional intelligence assessments, and the emotional intelligence 360 for all the managers and senior leaders. And we've implemented it as part of the onboarding for new employees to get to do both assessments. And they're keeping it top of mind throughout the lifestyle. Throughout the year, we have team wheels that we generate, lots of different team building sessions to really give people the tools, the tips and tricks to be able to work through and collaborate with their teams. So, and I've also seen it as part of some other organizations with, you might not hear as much about it, but if individuals put it on their personal learning plan, they will get opportunities to do that too. So if you don't know who your, I guess, certified folks are within your department, you might want to check with HR, because there are a lot of us out there certified in the tools, and you should be able to talk to them and see what the process is for your department or agency.
Nice. Okay. Thank you. I'm watching the time. I'm trying to be mindful of time, but Robert, I'm very curious about those blocks. I was wondering if you can tell us about them. I love merch. I love stuff. Yes, yes. If you guys could tell us about those.
Well, just quickly, and Insights Discovery is one of the preferred tools. I'll own it. It's preferred by me over Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, and I can do both. But these bricks is actually one of the main reasons why I prefer that tool over another, and I'm not selling it. But the thing is, in order for a psychometric assessment to live well in a team and to have a life beyond that one workshop, you have to have a vocabulary that makes sense to people, that is easy to use with one another, and where those shortcuts mean something a lot deeper, right? And so in this one instance, we use color energies. I know it sounds a little weird, but we talk about our color energies and our preferences, and we order them according to the one that I prefer the most to the one that I prefer the least. Note that I have all of them, and it just means that some of them are easier for me to use than others. But these bricks, you might see them in cubicles around your workplace when you're at work, that 40% of your time. And really, it's a way for us to use these shortcuts and to say, you know what, this is me, this is my profile. I'm obviously a lot more than this, right? It's really not that this is all of me and nothing more, but it gives you a nice little short cut to say, okay, he has a preference for his cool blue energy. He values details. He values homework. He values somebody coming to him with a proposal where they've done their homework. He's not the kind of guy who wants you just to come in with a big idea and nothing backing it up. Somebody else may like that and may like to work that through with you, and I can, of course, but my preference is for you to come with your big idea and a spreadsheet, because I'm going to believe you a whole lot faster if you do that. So that's the kind of thing. You're right. It's merch. Yes, it may be a gimmick, but it really gives us a tool. And remember, when we're talking about psychometrics, we're not talking about summing us up in one booklet that gets printed out for you. We're talking about tools that have uses, and there's a time and a place for them. And this is one of the kind of tools in the toolbox from that particular product.
Yes, and with these, they also have the little signature block, virtual blocks that you could put on as well. But as Robert said, we aren't just our preference on the top. We're a combination of all 4 color energies, but it's almost green for me. Show me you care is what it says on the block. That's autopilot for me. That energizes me. Blue is my lowest. I can do spreadsheets all day long. However, I'm so tired at the end of the day. It's taken all my energy. I can do it, but it's not my preference per se. So I had when I did my Myers-Briggs about 15 years ago, when I was certified, our instructor was the biggest extrovert you would ever meet, bouncing off the walls, so much energy for the 5 days. And we asked her to go out for dinner with us because we were off site, I think the first or second night. And she said, oh, no, I need to go home and go right to bed and recharge, have a bubble bath, whatever it may be. I've been peopling all day. She could do it, and she was incredible at it. But it's, where do we get our energy? So I also have a colleague who's really, like very, very extrovert as well. But if you asked him to go to dinner after he's delivered a full day session, he's got energy for all evening, because that is his preference. So it really comes down to that. But these blocks, like Robert said, you want to keep even your Myers-Briggs type profile, maybe have it as part of a session at your team meetings to do a little small exercise or something that we can do together. So keeping it top of mind and not just, and looking at your reports regularly, because you might read them once and then they go in your shit folder somewhere, never to be looked at again. it's nice to pick them up and read them regularly to see what you can get for your own self-awareness too, and not just how we work with others. So yeah, there's a lot of great details in there, our strengths and weaknesses as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much to the both of you. I wanted to open the floor up to some questions. I've got a few here that I would like to start off with. I think I will give this question to Robert. Although knowing personal psychometrics results helps a person grow individually, to what extent is it for the team to accommodate each person's preference and way of working versus the team's way of working and deliverables?
That's such a good question. Whoever put that in, thank you for that. Because the thing is, what we need, we as facilitators of these products remind people of this all the time, and then they go back to work and they forget. So it's important for you also to remind your colleagues gently that whatever their preferences are, or whatever their profile may be, it's not an excuse. And I've had to have that conversation with some of my colleagues where they say, you know what, I'm just an introvert. I can't do that kind of thing. Or I don't deal with details very well. Don't give that task to me. Okay, I'm sorry, we're a small team. Somebody has to do this. Today it's you. We'll help you with it. And there are ways for you to get better at it. But you know what? Getting better at it sometimes involves actually doing it. And so I think that question is really right. It's not about accommodating people to the extent where we're bending over backwards for people or adjusting, everything to favor one person over the rest of the team. What we're really doing is adapting and saying, you know what, I can adapt, you can adapt, let's meet halfway, and we'll be better for it because we'll be practicing those skills that we tend not to love every day. And we'll honestly become better at it and really hone our skills and develop those competencies that we all should have by the end of our career for sure.
Thank you. I'd just like to remind everyone that you can vote for the questions that you would like answered. Please feel free to upvote the questions that you would like our guests to answer for you. That question was part of a two-part question, which was upvoted. So Jody, I'm going to throw the second one to you. What is the purpose of preferences in a workplace where there are standards to be held to? To what extent should preferences be taken into consideration?
Wow, excellent question. I think when we're working with a team, it is nice to know what individuals' preferences are because, like we said earlier, it doesn't take as much energy when we're doing things that we really enjoy or that we prefer. Also, let's see, purpose of preference in the workplace. So, for one, just to get to know each other, even how we communicate, how we write emails to each other to get the best out of our team and to really to collaborate with one another. I do agree standards must be held. As Robert said, we aren't always going to be doing all the things that we love every day. We need to kind of stretch and go into all four of the different color energies or the different personality assessments. But for example, if I know someone who in insights has the preference to yellow energy, if I tell that individual the yellow energy is called Involve Me, they're probably the first to be signing up to organize an event for their team or potluck or whatever it may be. If you tell someone who has a preference for yellow energy how great this new change is, and they really buy into it and they see the value, they are going to infiltrate that throughout your team because they love it so much they want to tell everyone about it. So they can really help you with that type of things. If you have conflict, green is my preference, where I can see when there's things happening and when there is conflict, and I'm a natural peacekeeper in that way. So it is good to have these to talk about our preferences because it's collaboration. We want to know what people like and don't like. But yes, as we said, there is work we have to get done, and there will be parts of our job that we may not like as much as others, but we are still going to do them. And if we have to do spreadsheets all day, that's part of our job. Well, we will just go home and recharge our batteries at night if it does exhaust us. So I do feel it has a big role to play, but I agree. Our jobs have to get done as well. So the balancing act.
Yeah. Perfect. Thank you. Another question. Can you speak more of followership style? Robert, I think this is a good one for you.
Yeah, I wish there were more psychometric assessments available that just focused on that, because I think in many cases we do end up talking to people about their management style and their leadership style, and there are lots of great tools available on the market for that. And of course, our executives across the public service have all done stuff on their leadership styles. But all of us also have to follow somebody, and that includes our deputy ministers, right? Everybody does have to report to somebody else eventually. And I think it's just the mirror side. It's that flip side of your management style. Sometimes there are a lot of similarities, but in other cases there are not. And you can even translate this back into your own personal life. There are moments in your family life. Let's say there's a bunch of you in your household that are planning a vacation. Some of us have a management style around that, but many of us also have a followership style when it comes to our vacation mode. And I do think that there is a page, for example, in all of these products actually, where it talks about how that person can be managed. And that really is another way of talking about your followership style. And for example, I love to report to somebody who has that visionary, no holds barred, no limitations vision. That's not me, however, but I like to follow people like that. But I like to follow people like that who can also back it up with a little bit of evidence, because I'm not going to follow somebody blindly. And that's really my followership style. I follow people who have vision, but I don't follow blindly. Whereas I may have colleagues who are willing to follow somebody blindly because the vision is so strong and so good, and come what may, they'll be fine. But I need that reassurance and that safety net to know that there's some real research behind where we're going. And so that's followership style in a nutshell.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. This is a good question for both of you, actually. If my manager won't pay for these assessments, are there free versions that are comparable?
Yes, actually, there are a lot of free versions out there. The one that's similar to Myers-Briggs, Insights, Discovery, and DISC, which are based on Carl Jung's studies. It's called 16 Personalities. And I did have a team in the past that have used this. It's fully bilingual. There's several languages actually for this tool. And it's really an excellent tool. My team had used it, and we printed out the different 16 personalities, and individuals did the 10-minute assessment. And we had a really, really great discussion about it. And it's very comparable to the other assessments. We will be giving you a list of the assessments that are out there, the ones that we're familiar with, as well as some more free ones based on if it's a personality, or if there's a free emotional intelligence one out there through Mental Health Commission. I'll kind of go through my list and put something up in the resources page for you. Any others, Robert, that you're familiar with?
There's lots. I think you're referring to some really good ones, because the other caution that I would just mention to people is that there are lots of bootleg things out there too. So before you click on one and complete it, do be careful, because you don't want to end up on a phishing site either and giving your personal information to some bot in some place somewhere on the other side of the planet.
Good point.
Great points. I have another question. I took a course in university called Organizational Behavior, where psychometrics were involved. The professor taught us that psychometric tests have an average shelf life of 6 months per person. How might this relatively short psychometric shelf life impact the workplace?
I can start this one, Jody. I would argue actually that they have a longer shelf life in terms of their foundational core kind of principles around who you are and how you might prefer to operate. I think a lot of things are also contextual and situational. And I think it's super, super important to remember that things change, and I'm evidence of that. I've done Myers-Briggs a few times. I've done Insights Discovery, I think now 11 times. And I have changed on that Insights Discovery. It's the most recent one that I've done. And I remember why I changed and when I changed, and I wasn't happy with the change, but I knew that my way of being was being affected by some things at home, but mostly through a transition at work. So I think the main message there is that shelf life is a thing. And it's important to remember that we do progress and change, and our life situation, whether it's work or outside of work, is going to affect the way that we operate. And so the way that I might prefer to be managed, the way that I might prefer to be communicated with, just be aware that whatever that profile is, if it's an 8-year-old profile, yeah, take it with a grain of salt. But I think some things are kind of immutable. I do think it's interesting to, you asked earlier, Charlene, about whether people were introverts or extroverts or ambiverts. I think just living in the world moves us towards the middle. We may have a preference, that might be super deep, but I think all of us are able to navigate that line, that continuum between the two, because throughout the course of any given day, I know in my case anyway, I am required to be more introverted at times and more extroverted at times, and I am of a certain age, so I feel like I can do those skillfully. And I think the same can be said for a lot of the other kind of competencies and skills that get measured in these psychometrics.
Jody, there's a question for you to the point that you made around the way the 4 different personalities complement one another. What can we do about when these personalities create negative conflict? For example, if the team didn't consider the psychometrics of each other.
Excellent question. Yeah, so if they didn't consider it, well, I think it's important to recognize conflict at the earliest stage possible, so it doesn't fester and grow, and all of a sudden it's becoming inappropriate behavior, or then eventually harassment, right? So we want to tackle things at the earliest level possible. For example, in the past I got an email that said, "Send me that report," and it had the name of the report, and I thought, oh, I haven't talked to this person in a couple of weeks. Maybe they're upset with me. What did I do? And maybe I should just send that report back with no reply. Just attach it, and then they'll be like, "Ooh, what's with her?" Right? So it can escalate. So instead, I picked up the phone and I said, "I got your email. Is everything okay?" And they're like, "Oh yeah, I was just doing a whole bunch of other things at once, and I didn't want to forget, and I just shot that email off." And oh, no offense at all, right? So we talked it out and realized right there on the spot that that's just, I didn't have all the details. So be curious, ask why, ask people why they say this, what they say, or what did you mean by that? Can we talk this out? I can see as well, conflict is healthy for collaboration, because if we were all just, yes, boss, that's great. Well, we want to have individuals on the team that are also saying, well, no, I don't think that is great. As Robert mentioned earlier, the individual with the details, that they are questioning things that we're agreeing on. That's healthy for collaboration. But when conflict becomes a little bit more than that, we really want to talk it out and ask why and question that. So it's very important without even thinking about these assessments. Give your team the benefit of the doubt, get the details, don't make assumptions, and talk it out.
Really, really, really good advice. Well, that brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you so much for your information and your insights. You both are such a wealth of knowledge. I know that I've learned a lot, and I will definitely have a look at this recording the next time I have any questions. And I look forward to checking out all the resources that will be provided. I wanted to thank everyone for joining us today. The resources will be available on the wiki page, and the recording of this event will be available on our YouTube channel. Thank you so very much.
Amazing. Thank you, Charlene. And thank you once again to Robert and to Jody for joining us today. It was an amazing presentation. I also learned a lot. If you love this session and would like to see it again in French, please note that this session will also take place in French on another link at 2:30 p.m. Veuillez noter que cette session prendra place en français à partir d'un autre lien à 2h30. As Charlene mentioned, resources are available on our wiki page, and the recording will be available on our YouTube channel. Once again, thank you all so much, and have a good end of your day.